지금 우리말로 되는 거예요? 지금 통역권이 있는 거잖아. 통역을 하는 거잖아, 아니요. 이거 생긴 거죠.
Maybe you can just convene it. Yeah. Just why don't you?
Well, good afternoon again. We are running a little bit behind schedule, and that's probably my fault because I entertained one last question in the other room. But we're going to go ahead and get started now. Our first panel is going to be chaired by someone that I'm proud to say is a good friend of mine, Chung-In Moon. He is a distinguished academic and an equally distinguished player in the political scene. He has held high positions in both the academy and in politics. But I'm particularly proud to say that the first time I met Chung-In, he was a visiting scholar here at the Wilson Center. So, Chung-In, despite all your accomplishments, that's what we remember you for. So, without further ado, Chung-In, I turn things over to you.
Thank you, Bob. We'll run the show in somewhat different manner. Instead of making them make a kind of presentations to you, we'll just get into Q&A sessions from the beginning, and we'll have about 1 hour and 30 to 40 minutes, and then remaining 30 minutes we'll open the panel to the floor so that we can have open Q&As. I hope that'll be fine, right? Because since we're dealing with so broad topics, it might be somewhat strange for us to have the individual presentation. Therefore, we have agreed to just get to the Q&A session from the beginning. Prior to that, let me just introduce the panelists here. Emma Chantlet-Avery. Okay, she's Asia specialist in Congressional Research Service. She worked for the State Department, and she's one of the leading experts in Japan. Let us give a big applause to her. You all know Thomas Finger. He studied as a foreign service officer at State Department, and he was the first deputy director of national intelligence, and then he served as the chairman of National Intelligence Council. I met him in Seoul. In fact, he was leading global trend analysis several years ago, and we had a very productive talks. And I hope he will give a very wonderful view on the global trend. I hope he's still doing same thing at Stanford University. He's now distinguished fellow at the Institute of International Studies at Stanford University. Let us give big applause to Tom Finger. And next to Tom is former Foreign Minister Kim Sung-hwan. He's also now a distinguished professor at Seoul National University. In Korea, former foreign ministers, rarely become professor, but he was invited to serve as a distinguished professor in global responsibility, because graduates of Seoul National University do not have global social responsibility. Therefore, I think that is why they appointed President Oh Yeon-chun appointed him as a distinguished professor to teach about global responsibility of Seoul National University students. Let us give a big applause to the. And next to that is the doctor and the member of National Assembly, Kil Jong-woo. He's not foreign to Washington, D.C. He served here as a diplomat in charge of congressional liaison, and he also served as a correspondent of 중앙일보, and therefore he's very familiar with Washington, D.C. And also he's a political scientist by training. He got his PhD from Yale University. Therefore, he has so many heads, and he can be very provocative. He belongs to the ruling party, but he can show some dissenting views. So therefore, let us try to hear what kind of dissenting views he has. Okay, let us give big applause to Dr. Kil. The last but not the least, the rising star in South Korea. Professor Choi Park is a professor of international studies at Graduate School of International Studies at Seoul National University. He's a Japan specialist. But in Korea, Japan specialists are not welcome because they are, by definition, pro-Japanese. Okay? But what is amazing about it is, I see some kind of metamorphosis, the transformation of his identity as Japan specialist. Let us hear what he can talk about it. But in Korea, he tend to be anti-Japanese, but outside Japan, in Korea, he tend to be very pro-Japanese. Let us figure it out. What is here, honne, what's really authentic posture. I think we have a really wonderful, panelist here, I would say that really top, specialist from the United States and top specialist as well as practitioner from, South Korea. Let us start with the United States. What is your view of Chinese rise? Is it a threat or opportunity?
It's both. That I think the opportunities outweigh the dangers, but my starting point is that China's rise has occurred with the assistance of the United States, Japan, Republic of Korea, the other OECD countries, occurred within the rules of the international system, the liberal international order, that the Chinese people and leaders certainly deserve a lot of credit for what they have accomplished, but they've accomplished it, as I say, within the rules, the constraints, the opportunities of a broader international system to which they are ever more deeply enmeshed, increasingly constrained, have an increasingly significant stake in the preservation of that system, in the improvement of that system, in ensuring that it continues to facilitate the rise of the give or take 175 other countries that now take advantage of the opportunities that participation in this global system afford. China's rise has certainly made China stronger as well as more prosperous. It may make it eventually more influential. I don't think it is yet a lot more influential on the world stage. But as it has developed, it has acquired military capabilities, which it claims rightly it is entitled to acquire, but it hasn't explained for what purpose it has acquired these military capabilities at a time when most other countries in the region have frozen or are shrinking their defense expenditures. China is going the other direction in ways that have changed the strategic situation in the region. I'll end by saying this is a concern, it's a threat in the sense not of what China intends to do, might intend to do, but because it does require reevaluation, re-engineering of the arrangements in the region that have been responsible for peace and prosperity for decades. They will have to be adjusted.
But the Chinese rise does not really threaten American hegemonic position, right? And also it is very clear that China does not have a hegemonic ambition, right? As long as China does not have a hegemonic ambition, it won't be a threat to the United States. Do you agree with that statement?
I think it's the wrong way to phrase the proposition. The short answer is no. China's rise has not threatened the position of the United States in the global system, and probably will not for a long time. But China's behavior in Northeast Asia has contributed to prosperity in the region, is very important to the economic health and therefore social stability of others in the region. But lack of clarity about intentions, perceptions of greater assertiveness, concerns in the region about U.S. commitment, U.S. intentions, if forced to choose with the United States, opt for its very substantial interest with China or for the interests of others in the region. The uncertainties of it are a threat or endanger or certainly complicate the operation of the global order, which is very important to the United States. So it doesn't threaten the United States, But incorporating China more completely into that system clearly does challenge American capabilities.
Minister Kim, what is the South Korean take, or your personal take? Because you have been playing the balancing game between Beijing and Washington,
Yes,
right? You met Hu Jintao. I think that President Lee Myung-bak met Hu Jintao, what, 20 times or 40 times altogether?
Maybe less than 20 times or more than 10 times.
More than 10 times.
Yeah.
Therefore, when you were foreign minister, your ministry made a statement saying that the Lee Myung-bak government was most successful in diplomacy with China. First of all, do you agree with that statement? Because the statement came from your ministry.
That statement, yes, I made that statement, and so I agree with that. And you see, for Korea, China's rise gives both threat and opportunity. As you remember, since we established our diplomatic relationship in 1992, I think the speed and scope of development of relations between two countries has been unprecedented. And the main factor of developing relationship was economic cooperation. And now China is #1 trading partner for Korea. And trade with China is larger than trade with Japan and the US combined. So in that sense, China's rise gives us a new opportunity for developing our economy. But at the same time, there is a growing apprehension in Korea that we depend too much on China's economy. I mean, Korea's economy depends on China's economy too much. There is apprehension as there. And many people, including Danny Russell just before, talked about our reunification issue. And President Park Geun-hye said that reunification is a bonanza for us. But the ultimate key to reunification is surely in the hands of Korean people. But in that process, it is, I think, very critical to have support and cooperation from China. And because of that strategic and economic reasons, I mean, the most Koreans now, they acknowledge that we should have kind of amicable relations with China. But at the same time, many Koreans, through our experience in the past history, they know this continued rise of China can be a kind of source of restricting our activities. So both these two facts are there for Korea. But in the last CICA summit, you see that China, they want to make a joint statement at the last, just before the conclusion of the summit, but they're trying to make an, joint statement calling for the end of alliance in Asia. But for Korea, it is not acceptable. So we couldn't accept that. So even though we are developing our relationship with China, always the basis is, as Thomas Finger, he just mentioned that US, Japan, OECD all helped China to develop their own economy. But our last point is that even though our relationship with China has been developed to the strategic partnership, still the basis is Korea-US alliance.
But let's be very frank. The Lee Myung-bak government is very well known for pro-American stance. President Lee Myung-bak championed value alliance with the United States, strategic alliance with the United States, and etc. And the Beijing perceived such a stance as pro-U.S. and anti-Chinese stance, right? But now your position seems to be very similar to the Park Geun-hye government position. But
well, yeah.
You clearly because I have really witnessed the President Lee Myung-bak was somewhat concerned about Chinese rise, and some of his advisors outside the government were even arguing that there is a chance of Finlandization of North Korea first and the Korean Peninsula later. Therefore, South Korea got to be very, very stay on alert and strengthen alliance ties with the United States. Do you still hold that view, or that was President Lee Myung-bak's view, not your view?
You see, when President Lee Myung-bak first visited China, there was a kind of cold remarks by Chinese foreign ministry spokesman. He's talking about Korea-US alliance, and it was just 4 months after President Lee Myung-bak's inauguration, and they said that the alliance is the legacy of Cold War like that. Because of that, Lee Myung-bak government's Chinese policy was not as successful. But people say in that way. But it was only in the early part of Lee Myung-bak administration. And after that, we tried to build up our relationship with China. And sure, as I said, I don't want to make any priority there. But based on our relationship with Korea-US alliance, then we are trying to cultivate our new relationship with China. That is true, yes.
Dr. Gill, that is what President Park Geun-hye is trying to do, right? No? First, can you clarify?
Let me kind of defend Lee Myung-bak government's stance toward China. But I think that is, you simply defined Lee Myung-bak's foreign policy is tilting toward the U.S., strong pro-America. I think that might reflect that his predecessor, Roh Moo-hyun government's rather trying to a little far away from the United States. I think Lee Myung-bak's government trying to hit the balance to that, and especially at the in the tenure of Lee Myung-bak administration, there have been many episodes in our relations with China. Some Chinese government repatriated North Korean defectors enforced to North Korea, and also there have been several occasions in illegal kind of fishing boats in the West Sea and their violence against South Korean police, marine police. There have been many episodes really make the mood for Lee Myung-bak administration, and the people around that time, as also people feel not much friendly to the Chinese attitude toward Korea. But that does not necessarily mean Park Geun-hye government is tilting toward China much further.
Lee Myung-bak government.
Than Lee Myung-bak government.
Yeah.
I think I think we should still wait and see. There are many reasons Park Geun-hye government is trying to keep a certain, to some degree, some balance based on her kind of his policy of alignment, so-called alignment policy.
What is meant by alignment? Because, Park Geun-hye government used the term 균형 외교. If you translate 균형 외교 in Korean, it would be the balanced diplomacy or diplomacy balance. But she used the term in Foreign Affairs, in her article in Foreign Affairs, she used the term diplomacy of alignment. Therefore, can you clarify the difference between alignment and balance?
My reading of that, you should not misunderstand that alignment policy means trying to keep the balance between United States and China. So that is a kind of some vision statement she wants to make. The Korea should play some constructive and productive role to build the peace and prosperity in Northeast Asia, commensurate with its economic power and capability. So using alignment is just not easy to understand. Alignment is, for Americans, you can simply think alignment of wheels of the automobiles, not that kind of keep the balance. So 4 wheels is when you align well, you can just drive the car in the right direction. So that is not navigate in the right direction. You should keep it alignment.
Just common understanding was that during Lee Myung-bak government, the will was really biased toward the United States. Therefore, President Park Geun-hye wanted to pursue alignment of those, that bias.
I think the staff of the President Park before election have been discussing themselves what might be the right word in English. So, 균형 외교 in Korean. 균형 in Korean translation is balancing. Balancing does also kind of be interpreted. Korea can afford as a role of balancer in Northeast Asia. That's not true. And alignment, that's why that they just, after a long debate, just pick up the word of alignment. But I think my reading of that is this is a real vision statement. Korea is willing to play a rather constructive role and keeping our foreign policy in a more balanced manner.
But Vice President Joe Biden visited Seoul December last year, and he comes with a very interesting statement to President Park Geun-hye, saying that you got to have a right bet. Betting on the United States is right, and implying that betting on China could be wrong. And then President Park Geun-hye answered to his question, China is a very important partner in maintaining stability and enhancing development in Northeast Asian region. How should we understand President Park's answer?
If I read her kind of reply to that, Mr. Biden is, don't enforce Korea to choose between United States and China. That's it.
President Obama made it very clear in his interview with 중앙일보. He made it very clear, but President Park didn't give that kind of answer.
Why President of South Korea should answer clearly?
Well, yeah.
That's very good. Okay, then, Emma, what did you take on that one? I think he's being extremely diplomatic today. He's not. By the way, Dr. Kill is not very diplomatic. He, even though he was a diplomat, he's not a diplomatic politician. But Emma, what do you think about it?
Excuse me, first of all, my voice is almost gone, so if I do manage to squeak something out, I also have to say these are all my views, and not the views of the Congressional Research Service or Congress at all. I haven't studied in depth this exchange that you're talking about, but it seems to make perfect sense from the position of the President of South Korea to, in her public statements, certainly not throw herself to one side or the other if we're talking about a perceived competition within the region.
Okay, then since you're a Japan specialist, let us get to the Japan issues. Prime Minister Abe Shincho came up with a very wonderful slogan for his diplomacy, what he calls proactive pacifism. Okay, how can we interpret it? He's using the term proactive pacifism, yet all the countries in the neighborhood are concerned about the pacific nature of Japanese foreign policy. Can you elaborate about all these Abe-san's proactive pacifism?
Well, I've actually seen that translated a couple of different ways. I think that many times when you're speaking with Japanese representatives, they talk about a proactive contribution to peace. And this was included in the national security strategy that Japan released this year. And I don't think that it's particularly, I think that you can go too far in sort of parsing exactly what that means, but clearly there has been an effort to play a more forward role and to be more engaged in the security of the region from this government, although I think that there's also a tendency, particularly maybe within the press, to see what Prime Minister Abe has pursued as being something completely different than what administrations in the past in Tokyo have done. And actually, I think when you look at the series of security reforms that have been initiated from the new, for forming an NSC, a new state secrets law, easing the arms exports principles, I think actually it's much more incremental than you may assume. Many of these efforts were started in previous administrations, and it's not actually, it doesn't represent a radical difference from the past.
Sorry, do you agree with Emma's interpretation? But I think the whole this proactive pacifism has the most important dimension is what? Really revision from the past based on the peace constitution and Yoshida doctrine, right?
Yep.
But really deviating from those two principles, then there could be revolutionary changes in Japanese foreign policy. Therefore, I really don't think that any incremental change. It is really revolutionary change in Japanese foreign policy. Emma, let me get back to the Emma and then go to Charlie. Yes.
So you think it is a departure?
Departure. We see, particularly exercise of collective defense rights, and even the growing so-called, debate on the so-called nuclear armament in Japan and etc. Right? Therefore, we are really concerned about that kind of things. Therefore, it is not simply incremental changes or incremental adaptation to the rise of China. I think Japan is, Prime Minister Abe is going beyond that. What is your take in it?
I don't really see it that way. I do see it as more gradual and fairly deliberate. I mean, I don't pretend to know what Prime Minister Abe himself intends with this, but I think because Japan is a democracy, because they have free press, that we're seeing this debate play out within the Japanese public, and where I think that there is sort of a natural break on any tendency there in Japan, because a large portion of the population there does have some resistance to Japan playing a more forward role. There's politically, the coalition partner, Nukometo, also has some reservations about this role. So I think that we see sort of natural breaks on that process as well, and that we're not going to see a radically different security policy emerge from Tokyo.
Actually, then South Koreans and Chinese, they are making overly artificial overreaction to Japanese move.
Do you want me to speak as pro-Japanese or anti-Japanese?
What is it's up to you.
It's up to me?
Yeah.
Okay, then I have to explain the concept itself.
Show your real identity today.
Yes. Then I will show my real identity as a Japan specialist in the beginning. As you say, the proactive pacifism should be understood as a contrast to the pacifism in the past. Under the Yoshida Doctrine, Japan has been over-reliant on the United States in terms of securing Japan, and then advocated exclusive defense. Only when you attacked from the other party, you defend your country. But proactive, the pacifism, as I understand this, that is a kind of one of the three layers, even though this is the kind of big umbrella, the concept he uses for every security concept. But I think we have to understand that this term in the context of the rising China and the relative decline of the United States, the reduced security commitment in the Asia-Pacific region, and then Japan wants to play more role in the region. And then, in the context of the rise of China, they wanted to increase their defense capability, and then free their security hands a little bit more, and then strengthen the alliance tie with the United States, and then have a forging the friendly partnership with other regional powers. And then the proactive pacifism is, as Emma says, should be understood in two ways. One is a proactive contribution to global peace. It's not that much a bad phenomena. Japan has a role to play in the international security as a kind of a country that has a certain capability. It's good because it's better than not to play any role. But at the same time, another positive element of it is the Japan wants to play as a kind of status quo power rather than as a revisionist power, and then try to maintain liberal international order, including the freedom of navigation. And then try to keep the respect for the international law. So it's a kind of, I don't want to underestimate or just to kind of criticize the proactive pacifism from the beginning. What is lacking there is the kind of regional element of pacifism. Even though Japan wants to contribute to the global peace, he doesn't have any scheme to promote the regional peace, because Japan has a kind of very tense relationship with Japan and the Korea and China, with regard, especially with the historical and territorial controversies. So his pacifism doesn't look like a pacific in the region, from the small Northeast Asian angle. And then it's not proactive in a sense that if you wanted to promote the peace in the region is proactively, Japan should make much more utmost efforts to have a good relationship with the immediate neighbors. We don't see it. He doesn't have the good regional strategy to deal with China and South Korea from the beginning. That's the kind of big, the whole.
Okay, then what is your position now? You have given good side and bad side of the obvious, proactive pacifism. Then now what is your
don't try to define me as a kind of just one thing.
Oh, sure, yeah.
I'd better define his position. My reading of Japanese, especially under Prime Minister Abe, is, well, as Emma mentioned, this is gradual. This is very deliberate. And the Japanese, especially opinion leaders, intellectuals, and politicians have been working on this, discussed on this, meaning is to the coming to the normal state. Well, collective self-defense, that's fine. But there is conditions. I question myself, I've been watching Japan many years, why Japanese are so much obsessed with that kind of conception to come to the normal state. To everyone else, including its neighbors, Japan is very normal state. They can defend themselves by their military forces. They have under the nuclear umbrella. They are very strong strategic alliance with the United States. Japan is second largest market economic system. Why they are too much obsessed to the normal state? I think that the problem is, especially what worrisome to us is, they are really psychologically prepared to become normal and to pacifist the state. So they are, well, we should talk later probably Korea-Japan relations, but I think not directly seeing the past history in a balanced manner. Not sharing the history, reading of, interpreting of history shared with the neighboring countries. How Japan can declare and say they can contribute the peace, especially in the region. So I think that's basic questions. I cannot find myself a good answer to that.
Emma, would you take on that position? And also, can you elaborate what is meant by normal state? It's the same as what, Ozawa Ichiro's Huchu no Kuni, or because I'm confused about the concept of normal state. As Dr. Kill pointed out, the Japan is extremely normal state. Now they want to be normal state. I don't know how they can find normalcy in the situation of normalcy.
I can't say that I think that Japan has been obsessed with this notion of being a normal state. I mean, this is a panel made up of mostly Koreans, and that's the title given to this panel. I think that the steps that Japan has taken are just sort of bring them in line with most of the other developed countries that we see in the world. The steps that they're talking about taking, even in reinterpreting the Constitution to allow for the right of collective self-defense, is probably the most ambitious and the heaviest lift that they have politically. Yet that's not something that I think would be seen as at all abnormal for another advanced country to talk about. So I continue to see these reforms that are talked about as, when you look at them independently on their own, as being fairly modest in scope.
No, but the problem with Japanese behavior is this: when Japanese use the term normal, then it occurs to the minds of Koreans that they wanted to revise the Article 9 of Peace Constitution. It's a really big hypocrisy, in the constitutional hypocrisy, that it wanted to be truly normal sovereign state by changing Article 9 of Peace Constitution. And another one is really getting out of the whole, Yoshida doctrine, okay? And we got that kind of impression. And more than that, some people in Korea and China tend to believe that Japan becoming a normal state could mean Japan becoming militarism in the 1930s. Of course, I do not agree with that one, but there is some fundamental, misunderstanding on the part of, South Korea and, China, even North Korea too, even some, outside, folks too. Charlie,
I think we have to get out of this kind of the Chinese and Korean understanding of Japan, because it has some bias, as U.S. has some bias about Japan. As you say, Japan, the two main pillars of Japanese security policy in the post-war years, well, one is the US-Japan alliance, the other is peace constitution. So the ironical thing is that what Japan is aspiring to be at this moment is that in order to strengthen US-Japan alliance, they wanted to untie and free their hands and then get rid of the constitutional constraints. So the changing, at least the interpretation of the Article 9, or change the constitution itself. So, but we should not be too much worried about Japan returning to the imperial Japan, because Japan is under the framework of the US-Japan alliance. That's the critical difference between the pre-war Japan and then current Japan. The reason why we produce a lot of misunderstandings or too much worry about Japan at this moment is that Abe's aspiration for normal country is mixed combination of two things all at the same time. One is defense revisionism. He wanted to make a militarily normal country. At the same time, he wants to make a get out of this kind of historical constraints. He wants to change the interpretation of history, past history, which is quite worrisome. It's not normal. It's truly abnormal. It's thinking that they try to retrieve the old, the pride of the imperial Japan. This is a very dangerous phenomenon. That's the reason why we have a keen eye on Japan's change, not the constitutional change itself. It's combined movement. The defense revisionism and history revisionism combined. If there is no history revisionism, possibly the neighboring countries' concern would be a little bit more alleviated. But as two things are coming together, oh, this is wrong. It reminds of us a imperial Japan.
Tom, what, as an outside observer, vis-a-vis Japan and South Korea, and if you look at the rise of China, and there's a clear, the benefit of making strategic cooperation between Japan and South Korea, strategic interest in there. Yet, out of these history issues, those two countries are really falling apart. How do you see that phenomenon?
I see it in a way that I find very troubling. Let me come at it from three directions that hopefully will weave together. One is the concern for the absence of a security architecture in Northeast Asia, a region of superlatives in everything. Most people, most nuclear countries, largest militaries, largest military budgets, largest trading nations, largest foreign exchange, sort of everything. And the only security arrangements are two legacy bilateral alliances with the United States and a legacy bilateral alliance of China and North Korea. We need to do better. From my own perspective, thinking of regional collective security in a way that has the potential to bring China inside the security arrangement, because if we don't bring them inside, the default is it's against China. It's anti-China. I cannot speak for the United States. As one American, that's a bad idea. We can't even begin a conversation about regional collective security because we've got one country, Japan, that can't play. We've got two countries, Japan and Korea, that won't talk to one another about these kinds of issues. And I find that very troubling in terms of the future requirements for the region to preserve the peace and prosperity that has existed. The second strand coming in has to do with characterization, I would say mischaracterization, of the steps that Japan is contemplating or taking as somehow indicative of a return to Japan of the 1930s. That to me is frankly ridiculous, that you have to have had your head in some orifice for the last several years to think that that is what's going on. It makes no more sense than looking at changes in South Korean politics in terms of a reversion to the military authoritarian regime of 30 years ago. Makes no sense. And I do not understand why there is this knee-jerk propensity to view actions in Japan as indicative of a back to the future. And if there are concerns, they ought to be discussed, not simply condemned. The third has to do with the importance of historical memory, which is very strong. And it strikes me how strong this memory is in 3 generations that did not experience that history. That anybody who's my age, so anybody less than 70 has no direct memory. Anybody less than 80 has no direct memory. But my God, these are strong convictions. And they get in the way of any vision for the region. What do we, who are Asia-Pacific countries, particularly the principal countries in the region, which certainly includes Republic of Korea, what do we want our region to be like? What does it take to get there, to ensure that the now waningly effective institutions, economic, security, cultural, that are in place that were designed for almost a century ago, can be reshaped for the future? And in my interaction with people in the region, most recently a few weeks ago at Stanford on Divided Memories, a conference, there was no indication of interest, I don't know, willingness of any of our Chinese, Japanese, or Korean participants to want to find a way to say, here is a goal that makes it important to resolve, overcome, work around the historical legacies. It was all, we got these historical memories, and therefore we can't do anything. I'm troubled because of the unwillingness to imagine a better future.
Minister Kim, you were once a victim of this politicization of collective memory of past history. What would be your answer to Tom's question?
As you know, it is not a direct experience by our generation. It's outcome from our education. But still, everybody knows that Korea was invaded, and now Japanese saying kind of example of how to implement then collective self-defense right. That means they are using Korean Peninsula situation as an example. So it means they can send their troops to Korea. That's why Koreans are very sensitive to this issue. So the Japanese Professor Park mentioned that there's a misunderstanding on
Japanese Professor Park, right?
I mean, Japanese specialist Professor Park. Well, there is a misunderstanding on the part of Korea and China that because of the past experience and plus together with lack of transparency there. If Japanese government do it in the transparent way, and if they consult with us, if they have prior consultation with us, we can understand what they want to do. But there is no consultation at all. Just they are doing what they want to do. And that's why Koreans are saying, and they express their apprehension. So at this moment, I think the most urgent task is for leaders of both countries. They need to understand the current situation is in no one's interest. And they should refrain from actions which can be seen or interpreted as provocative by other side. So, and we try to increase our exchanges of the people-to-people exchange and also exchanges of people in the economic sector. Then through that process, we can overcome this animosity. And it is not easy to see that in a short period of time we can overcome the current situation. Is not that easy, I think.
Dr. Kiel, Mr. Lippert, the Korean ambassador nominee, made a statement in the Congress saying that the United States would play a role of mediation between Japan and South Korea, particularly regarding current stalemate. What did you take on that?
Yes, actually, I really welcomed his statement yesterday in his confirmation hearing at the Senate. But I really do not know what that means, really what the United States can play.
I heard that he retrieved his statement today. But anyhow, yeah, you can go ahead, yes.
So, so I think the problem when we see the Japanese move and the potential U.S. role in between Korea and Japan is the Japanese leaders seems to think they are the victim of the Pacific War, the Second World War. But the Koreans and Chinese and some other Southeast Asian countries, we are the victims of the Japan initiated the war. I think that is the beginning of the problems. Still, Japanese are the victims, but victims by whom? The war Pacific War initiated by the Japan, but they got defeated, led by the United States. The Japanese mentality is a victim by the United States. So I think United States has some burden to play a certain role if there is something wrong in between Korea and Japan. Both countries perceive they are the victims of the Second World War.
So what, you're saying that the U.S. can play a role or not?
Play a role, but in what sense? That kind of victimize and another kind of territorial claim on Tokto Island, Japanese, that is Takeshima, that issues, it explains everything, the current picture between Korea and Japan and potential U.S. role. Tokto Island was on the draft of 1951 San Francisco Peace Treaty. That's wrapping up the Second World War. At the fifth or sixth draft, Tokto Island was clearly in the kind of the documents which transfer from Japan to Korea. But at the final kind of papers, Tokto Island missed. That is the beginning. That is the background that the Japan is playing and the claim the territory. Meaning is San Francisco Peace Treaty, as you all know, that is actually made by several countries, but led by the United States. The U.S. has some responsibility to make it clear what really happened and what was the real intention. So United States has made it much more clear, not ambiguous position on that kind of territorial issues. And so U.S. has a lot of historical documents, the National Archive in Washington, D.C. Meaning is Japanese government or Japanese military officially get engaged on comfort women, sexual slavery under Japanese military. So they did make clear, they showed that historical documents to Japan, and Japan should face the reality, face the past history directly. So there are many ways and the United States can play to normalize. You question the rapprochement. Rapprochement is not the right word to explain the current situation between Korea and Japan, but back to the normal, the U.S. can surely can have some role to play.
Charlie, I think let us go back to Tom's very important statement. Look, Japan is much democracy. It is impossible for Japan to go back to 1930s militarism. Okay, and if that, as long as mature democracy dictate the political landscape of Japan, Japan can never be a threat to South Korea, right? Do you agree with that statement?
I think there's two barriers that make Japan not going back to the past. The U.S.-Japan alliance, and Japan is a democratic country. It's not an authoritarian country, so it's a divided opinions are down there. But there is a kind of always a danger that I think a historical memory thing, and no direct memory. That is a very interesting thing. The Abe is typical post-war generation who does not have any direct memory about the past. And he's trying to find out only the one part of the past memory rather than the entire memory. That's the problem, source of the problem. And the thing is that I think Tom Finger raised a very interesting question that we don't have a regional collective security mechanism, and then we don't have a kind of a regional dream of living together. Among 3 countries in Northeast Asia, which country do you think is the kind of most the strongest advocate of a regional arrangement? Collective security arrangement? We want it. And then the regional coexistence and peaceful coexistence, other than any other country, Korea wants it. But what is blocking the development of the regional arrangement at this moment is the 2 regional powers. China is overconfident about its power, and then thinking that the time is on his side, and then just waiting for the kind of a regional hegemonic position. Japan, too fearful of rising China, and then try to retrieve the old memory of the glorious past, and then try to find a kind of only one part of historical memory and then make Japanese proudful about the past, which creates a lot of problem. Japan at this moment sounds like a kind of a 19th century or early 20th century, not in terms of the system, but the idea, Tatsuan-yo, get out of Asia and then join the West. So for Japan, in the eyes of the Japanese, the Korea and Japan is a kind of, Korea and China are 2 noisy neighbors. They don't want to get along with those East Asian neighbors, and then having a much more tightened relationship with the United States and other European partners rather than with Korea and China. So what Japanese leaders should develop new ideas that Japan is a part of Asia, and you have to develop how to live with harmony with the regional neighbors in the first beginning.
Then,
yeah.
Charlie, under what condition or under what circumstances would Japan be a threat to South Korea or a unified Korea?
The biggest challenge, getting out of I'm closely watching on the development of US-Japan relations. As long as the US keeps a strong alliance relationship with the US, it might be manageable. If Japan has any intention, try to get away from the US-Japan alliance, I would ring a warning bell immediately.
But Emma, if Japan is able to amend the Peace Constitution Article 9 and also get rid of all this Yoshida Doctrine, okay, then isn't it like taking genie out of the bottle? That for Japan would become much more nationalistic. What is your take on that interpretation?
I think we're far away from actually changing the Constitution itself in Article 9. And we've seen, even if there are those that have those ambitions and that notion, we've constantly seen a ratcheting down of the goals, and the goalposts sort of getting further away. So I don't see that coming to pass anytime soon. And I think it remains a pretty divisive topic in Japan, not just among the elite and among the politicians, but among the general public too.
Then also, like Charlie, you strongly believe that Japan would never be a threat to, South Korea or unified Korea, right? As long as democracy is mature and alliance with the United States sustains.
I don't see that as being
You don't
a
see
threat.
that. Tom?
I want to come at this by going back to a comment that was made earlier. I've forgotten, I'm sorry, exactly who said it. That the statement was that U.S. reduced security commitment in Asia. I certainly know of no evidence of reduced U.S. security commitment to Asia, and I would welcome sort of what the evidence of that is. Indeed, quite the opposite in the rebalance or pivot articulated, which is we may draw down other places, we may reduce the budget, but not for Asia. That I don't think it would be possible to be much clearer on that. But because of the number of times that the importance of the U.S.-Japan security commitment has been mentioned as one, along with democracy, as a factor shaping Japanese possibility space, I think as Americans, it's important to note that it may be a good thing that the vast majority of Americans are not aware of the totally one-sided nature of the U.S.-Japan security commitment. We are obligated to come to Japan's defense. It cannot come to the defense of the United States because of its interpretation to this date of the Article 9 and collective security arrangements. It would seem to me, for all those interested in the strength of U.S. security commitment to our allies in the region, that making these relationships something different than they were at the time when they were extended from a very strong country to two very much weaker countries than Japan and Korea are today. Politically, that would seem to me to be something worth pursuing. While I've got the mic, I want to comment on the U.S. has a responsibility to play a role in the history issues. As somebody who spent a fair number of years in support of operational jobs in the U.S. government, not as a foreign service officer or a policymaker, but as an analyst, I would be very reticent to undertake an undertaking that I would characterize as trying to push on a string. We, the United States, cannot want improved relations, closer security cooperation between Japan and Korea more than Japanese and Koreans want them. That is an effort that is doomed to fail. If it is we're working on this problem and we need some help, we want your participation, that's very different than saying we are two countries that are still so immature that we can't tackle this problem in our bilateral relationship. Fix it for us. I can't imagine any U.S. officials stepping up and saying, I want that one.
I need one footnote.
Okay.
I didn't say that the U.S. is the reducing its security commitment to the region. I was talking about the kind of Japanese conservative leaders' perception about U.S. security commitment. If U.S. is strongly committed to the region, why do I have to depend to develop more autonomous independence capability of Japan? And why do you need the collective self-defense if the United States is so strongly committed to defend Japan? As they have some kind of a lingering suspicion about the security commitment of the United States. That's the reason, one of the reasons why they are trying to change their defense posture.
Tom, here comes, let me just raise a question to Minister Kim. Mm-hmm. In fact, we discussed about that one, the President Obama's speech at West Point, reminded some South Korean scholars and intellectuals of the Guam Doctrine by Richard Nixon. Therefore, in other words, if you analyze President Obama's speech at West Point, you can clearly see, waning commitment on the part of American government to the world, and therefore, there is some concern on the part of South Koreans. Minister Kim, what is your take on that speech?
Yeah, well, before I speak on that issue, I just want to tell you one story-like anecdote. In 1882, as Danny Russell said, we concluded peace and amity and also navigation commerce agreement with the United States in 1982. And at the time, one Qing dynasty diplomat stationed in Tokyo, he wrote a book for Korea King Kojong, and his idea was to ally with Qing and align with Japan and liaising with the United States. And there was a big debate in the court of King Kojong at the time. And after that, they decided to conclude that kind of treaty with Western countries, and the United States became the first one. And in that treaty, there is a clause that in case of threat by other powers, then U.S. promised to provide good offices. And at the time, it was understood by the King Kojong that in any circumstances, the United States will come to aid. But contrary to his expectation, the U.S. sided with Japan, and they supported because of the Kasra-Taft Treaty, U.S. sided with Japan, and they deserted Korea. So one scholar jokingly said that that was the first betrayal by the United States. And because of that, I mean, inside the Koreans' mind, and there was second betrayal by, is another joke, is by when you exclude Korea from the defense perimeter in 1949, North Korea invaded at that time. So I'm not sure whether this is a true excuse for North Koreans to invade South, but anyhow, some say that's second betrayal. So I'm saying because inside the Koreans' mind, there's a kind of, I mean, psychological effect that U.S. should come to aid when we have some difficulties. But when you see the speech at the West Point of President Obama, it reminded us of Nixon doctrine because, as Professor Moon described, it is waning military commitment. So they are, I mean, U.S. is asking its alliance partner to do first. So, but I hope the commitment to our security by the United States, as Danny said, it is, we don't have any doubt on that, but always, whenever there is kind of speech in the United States, it's true that we have apprehension on that. So we'll closely watch how U.S. will do.
Dr. Kill,
Yeah.
Yes.
if you look at the title of this panel, it's Chinese Rise, Japan's Quest of Normal State, and the Future of ROK U.S. Cooperation. Apparently, North Korea is deleted, omitted from the list. What, is the North Korean threat is a constant, take it for granted, or is it irrelevant,
I think
or marginal?
A simple reason why North Korea is not included in that kind of question is everyone agrees, everyone shares the same thinking that North Korea is a constant threat up to the moment of two Koreas get united. That's my reading.
The way I see South Korea is that the South Koreans do not feel any threat from North Korea, or take it for granted, or get it so familiarized with the threat from North Korea.
I think we cannot say it, actually. North Korea is a constant threat, but kind of North Korean threat fatigue, I think, in some sense. We have been living with North Korea's constant threat for the more than 6 decades, and even under North Korean nuclear weapon threat, we lived with nuclear North Korea more than 20 years. So I think in some sense this is a fatigue, as well as we are some kind of powerless.
Powerless or complacent?
I think mixed, because powerless means is we have been trying almost every means to solve the North Korea's nuclear question for the last 2 decades.
Do you really believe that the South Korean government made every effort to solve the North Korean nuclear problem?
Well, yes. We made every effort.
Yes. So
But government was a bystander.
we tried everything, but not enough. Not enough, because of each country has rather different perspective to see that North Korea's threat as a threat. So I think that still remains. That really North Korea's threat is exactly the same, to same degree perceived by China, the Korea, or even the United States. I think each country has a rather different perspective to see that.
Okay, let me raise the more provocative, question,
Please.
which is, generally, raised by the progressives in South Korea. The reason why the American government is not really pushing for the resolution of North Korea nuclear issue is very simple, because the United States want to continue conflict on the Korean Peninsula so that they can justify the presence of American forces in South Korea. To what extent it has a validity?
Very familiar kind of argument.
What do you
That is
take?
rather outdated, because U.S. is not that strong, not that influential. U.S. is not hegemon anymore in the region.
You're kidding? U.S. not hegemon?
Well, actually, when we discuss from the beginning about the rise of China, that means relative decline of other Western countries, including the United States. We should acknowledge that the Chinese people, does their own accomplishment so far. So why we are concerned about rise of China? Because we are relatively get weaker.
Tom, I really don't think that China has risen. There's no way for China to compete with the United States, particularly in military domain. Why? Hold this hegemonic rise of China seems to be rather contrived than real. What did you take on that one? You did a lot of analysis on that issue.
Well, I think China's economic achievements, political reforms, as far as they've gone, its foreign policy accomplishments, deserve the characterization of a rise. They've certainly made major achievements, as I noted earlier, within the existing system. But on the list of things that bother me as I interact with friends and colleagues in East Asia is a propensity to apply what I would call seesaw analysis. If somebody's going up, somebody else is going down. If China is rising, whatever the hell that means, it means the United States is in decline, is weaker, therefore cannot...
In real or in contrived?
It's totally contrived. That it requires willful inattention to facts. That, let me just put a couple out there for consideration. One is the primary, some would argue, the only dimension that people point to as an indication of China's rise is its economic achievements. Very significant economic GDP growth in GDP, soon to overtake the U.S. in gross GDP figures. Okay, that's impressive. Over the 35 years in which that has occurred, the population of China added to the workforce more people than live in the United States. If they did very little, you'd make the GDP go up a lot with 350 million people. That before China's rise, and before a lot of other things that also are significant, like the demise of the Soviet Union, the expansion of the European Union, the rise of India, Brazil, Indonesia, Turkey, the U.S. share of the global economy was about 25%. 35 years later, all of those things happened, including the rise of China. The global economy is hugely larger than it was. Prosperity is far more widespread. And the U.S. share is still about 25%. What has happened is the U.S. share of global population has decreased from 6 to 4.5%. So if you can go into lots of other dimensions on this, the loss of American influence capability because of the global financial crisis. In the years since the collapse in 2007, U.S. share of global financial activities has gone from 46 to 53%. That doesn't suggest a loss of capability or confidence in the U.S. So one could go through lots of other examples. Militarily, the gap between China and the United States widens. Soft power, I simply cannot make a list of countries that want to be like China. They wish their country could be like China. Be prosperous, grow fast? Yes, absolutely. But with even a modicum of democracy, that's not a very appealing model for China. So the idea that the U.S. is in decline is one more, that China is beginning to hit the middle income challenges, middle income trap. That it's not unreasonable to say China will be lucky over the next decade to sustain growth of 5 or 6%. Still pretty impressive. To grow at the rate that Africa has grown for the last decade. But by their numbers, that's too low to provide jobs for the 17 million that continue to enter the urban workforce each year. And if China is growing at 5 or 6%, and the projections for the U.S. because of shale gas and the like, that growing at 3 or 4% will be very easy. If we grow 3 or 4%, they grow 5 or 6%, the gap widens economically. In absolute terms, in per capita terms, These are real numbers. So
Tom,
it's
okay.
just puzzling why people...
Okay, and I think Tom has given really good, concrete data, set. But then, Minister Kim, if Chinese rise is contrived, then Chinese threat could have been contrived too. Then there is no need for South Korea to join trilateral missile defense in the theater. Well, what is your take on that one, right?
You see, these issues are a bit different, It's rather related with the threat from North Korea, not from China. And
do we have a Korean area missile defense?
Yeah, area missile defense.
Yeah, therefore, do you want to just continue to pursue, Korean type of missile defense, or you want to join the theater missile defense with Japan?
So still, as far as I know, Korean government position is to have the Korean own missile defense system. So in this case, what I think is there should be no political consideration there or diplomatic consideration there. There should be thorough cost-benefit analysis first, and if that is, necessary for defense of Korea Peninsula, or then we should do that. And if there is something we should explain to our neighbor countries, we should do that. So before we think in terms of politics or diplomacy, we should do benefit analysis first, and then we should go forward.
What was the position of Lee government during which you served as foreign minister?
It was the same. We will pursue our own Korean missile defense, KMD. Yes.
Okay, how about Dr. Kill?
Well, actually, at the luncheon, Daniel Russell mentioned on that we means Korea and the U.S. have a shared interest with ballistic missile defense. That reminds me at that time that, well, surely the U.S.-Korea has a common interest to have a ballistic missile defense system. But then why the United States is still regulating South Korea to develop its missile technologies? Surely defense and offensive, those totally different, but technology is the same actually. Still, South Korea is under the very strict regulation in bilateral terms in the developing the long-range missiles. So that reminds me, and following the Minister Kim's statement, we should have a very thorough kind of analysis that is really will be an asset that Todd, U.S. Suggested, is really good and effective to the cost that South Korea should pay, regardless of any political or strategic challenge or claims by the Chinese government. We should take a look at ourselves. There's cost and benefit. There
have been a lot of assessment of whether we join the MD or not, but why don't you tell the answers, It is easy for you to say, oh, we should engage in studies, but making judgment and decisions.
Well, still, yesterday our defense minister answered in the National Assembly that Korea is still not in favor of accepting the U.S. suggestions.
Minister Kim, you agree with it?
Yes. That was Korean government's clear.
When we had the, dinner last night, you had some different view. Anyhow. Now, since time is almost up for among our discussions, let me just ask a final question each. Emma, starting with Emma. What do you see the future of ROK's U.S. alliance? Would it go well?
I think we're on very strong footing right now. What I've seen in looking at the relationship between sort of the working relationships in an alliance and how the political leaders are getting along at the top is that when things are aligned politically and that either the presidents or the administrations are seeing eye to eye strategically, even the sort of garden variety problems that come up within any alliances can be smoothed over and worked through. But when you're not getting along at the top, that's when those issues can spike and suddenly become sort of, highlighted in the bilateral relationship. So I think that the US-ROK alliance has done well because we have basically a shared strategic perspective, at least in terms of the threats on the Korean Peninsula. And that has really kept the momentum going there. If we lose that connection at the top, then I think there are all sorts of cost-sharing issues, issues surrounding the OPCON transfer, delays in the relocation process that suddenly can loom much larger in the relationship.
Tom?
I don't disagree with anything that Emma said. Let me hold on it a little more literally with the US-ROK cooperation rather than simply the alliance. I think the alliance is strong. The alliance is very important. The alliance will continue. But the alliance is a decreasingly important part of the total US-ROK relationship. Once that was the great big fat pillar and everything else was pretty limited. That the evolution of Korea, the strengthening, expansion, strengthening of ties across a whole range of political, educational, social, economic, technology issues, that our two countries are ever more interconnected, interdependent, intertwined, and the alliance is one strand of that multi-strand rope. There will be ups and downs in each of these dimensions, including the alliance, but I think we can all have confidence that the number and strength of the strands in the relationship will carry us through the rough spots and give great reason for optimism that the relationship will not just remain strong, will become stronger and more expansive as the ROK assumes the greater role in the region that it should assume because of its success over recent decades.
Kim?
Well, particularly nowadays, related with China's rise, the most commonly asked question in Korea is our alliance with the U.S. According to our opinion poll, Korean people, they think strategically, so they favor the so-called diplomatic strategy of managing both relations harmoniously. But according to the survey conducted by ASEAN Institute this March, I mean, people support, Korean general public support for Korea-US alliance remains at its almost record high. 93% of the respondents, they supported the Korea-US alliance. So this statistics is showing that our US-Korea alliance is strong and robust. And as Danny mentioned, now we have expanded our alliance not only in the region, but in the whole global scene as well. So I think, as you said, it will be stronger and it will be expanded. I'm sure that, yes.
Dr. Kiel?
Well, our ambassador, An Ho-young, to Washington and his American Express card, Daniel Russell, both mentioned and emphasized our alliance cannot be better. I really count on them. But the future of, probably immediate future of Korea-US alliance might be affected by a couple of factors. One is how US treats China. And then secondly, how United States will take a position on several contentious issues in Korea-Japan relations. And thirdly, how the US North Korea policy. Those three major factors will affect to quite a certain degree the culture and the direction of Korea-US alliance.
Sorry?
Yeah, I generally agree with the statement that Korea-US relations is robust. Military alliance is a strong, economic partnership remain resilient, human exchange and per people-to-people relations are really strong than any other country. The biggest challenge, except all these defense issues, would be how to retrieve, normalize the relationship between Japan and Korea. The Japan issue will remain a kind of very burdensome challenge in strengthening the U.S.-Korean relations. So I think the United States, my sense is that at the heart of the problem is the Abe's historical awareness issue. So how to control the Japan's Abe's the historical revisionism issue is the kind of a key to solve to improve the relationship between the two. So I think Korea and the United States should work together to give a very friendly advice to Abe and Abe cabinet that you have to control your temper in order to retrieve a good relationship between the two. If we can develop a good Korea-Japan relations, Korea-U.S. relations can be stronger than ever.
Okay, with this one, now I will go to the floor. Okay, there are so many people raising hand. Okay, let me start with Alan Lomberger first. And identify yourself, and then, the microphone will be there. Let me just designate from this side, Alan, and then gentleman over there, and the lady over there. And then, okay, then young gentleman here, and the four of them, and then go. I'm sorry, I love geography, therefore, geographic proximity, therefore, and those who are closer to me will get a first right.
Thank you. Alan Romberg, Stimson Center. First, I want to thank the panel. This has been a really interesting discussion. I wouldn't say I agreed with everything, including particularly our provocative MC here, who is very good at putting burrs under saddles to force people to respond. I wanted to make two, I'd love to respond to it all, but there are two basic issues I just wanted briefly at least to discuss. One is the issue of U.S. commitment. I appreciated that Tom Finger forced Professor Pak to clarify what he said, because I heard you say the same thing that Tom did. So I'm glad you were putting it in terms of the perceptions in Japan that you're concerned about, and not your own perception of a decline. The second thing, Minister Kim, you talked about all the concerns in Korea about betrayals. I think that as Koreans, prominent Koreans especially, talk about issues like that, which are very sensitive, they also might throw in the sacrifices of the United States in the Korean War, because I think that that really speaks more to the level of commitment of the United States than Taft-Katsura. I thought we might get through without reference to Taft-Katsura, but we didn't. But I really think that 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 and the modernization of the alliance ever since is much more important. The second thing I would talk about is the necessity to really talk about the facts of what Japan is seeking to do. First of all, in collective self-defense, my understanding, and you obviously have a different one, Minister Kim, is that they are limiting what they're talking about, and they have explicitly said that they wouldn't send forces to another country, i.e. Korea, without the permission and agreement of that country. So I agree that there are a lot of people in Korea talking about this, and fearfully that somehow Japan is going to do this. But I don't think that's what collective self-defense is all about at all, and I hope that that discussion will mature in Korea. The second thing is talking about Article 9, which I called up while we were listening to you. My understanding, and I leave it to Emma or others, Professor Pak, for example, to correct me, but they're not trying to do away with the ban on using war as an instrument of policy and so on and so forth. What they're talking about doing is legitimizing having an armed force, which everybody knows that they have. And they're not talking about really about revising the Constitution at this point. They're just talking about being more able to operate in, and I do think normal is a perfectly good phrase here. You know, when Japan expands its military, you hear throughout Korea and China, oh, you know, they better be careful. And clearly history is a huge issue here, and it does need to be addressed. I wouldn't disagree with that at all. But would anybody say that about another country?
Okay, let us take two more questions, and then I will return to the floor. Okay, gentleman over here.
Yes, thank you. Mike Billington. I'm with Executive Intelligence Review. I have two questions. One, I think the Japan security question is avoiding the most important issue, which is that China's not primarily worried with Japan going back to militarism. They're concerned about the United States militarism. They know, for instance, as the world does, is that the U.S. is preparing, and NATO, preparing for war on Russia. They've just placed a hostile government in power in Ukraine. They're militarizing the region. They're placing ABM systems around Russia. And they're trying to place the same ABM systems around China. And that's exactly what Korea is opposing, because they know the THAAD missiles are aimed at China, not at North Korea. And they know that the air-sea battle doctrine is a first strike doctrine. This is the reality. The West is in a financial disaster. They're pushing for confrontation and war. China says so over and over every day. And to avoid that discussion here, I think is wrong. I think you need to address that. Secondly, on North Korea, the question of, the U.S. policy as expressed also by Mr. Russell is you do what we say, do away with your nuclear weapons, and then you'll get some goodies. Well, that's not South Korea's policy. It's not Russia's policy. And in fact, Mr. Putin was in Seoul and discussed with Seoul the building of railroads and pipelines through North Korea. Mr. Galushko, the Russian ambassador on the Far East, was just there in the north, where they agreed to go ahead with rail connections and gas and pipeline connections. This is peace through development, not threats, not war threats. And I think we have to, just because we happen to be here in the United States, I think, stepping around the reality of the great danger coming from this country at this point should not be avoided.
Lady over there.
Thank you. I enjoyed the discussion very much. I'm Rose Chen, born and raised in Taiwan by parents from mainland China. My father was a US-trained fighter jet pilot. I am very offended by the comments from the panels here and in other places saying the Japanese invasion to Korea and China, the atrocity is long time ago. I can assure you, my grandparents' generation, my parents' generation, not just in China and Korea, is overseas Chinese, numbers in 20 to 30 million. This is a collective memory. And for someone to tell us this has happened a long time ago, tell that to the Jewish people. Not a day goes by, we will not be reminded about the horror of the Holocaust. And to imply that Korea or China is immature not to face up the problem, I think Japan is the one. They have not yet owned up to the atrocity they committed and the mistake they have made, and they are trying to revise the history.
Thank you. Would you just respond to three comments and questions?
Yeah, well,
yeah, Mr. Kim.
Dr. Rumbo, thank you for your presentation and clarification as well. Regarding U.S. commitment, I'm sure there will no change at all, and we always feel that strong commitment. And also Koreans always appreciative of U.S. sacrifices there. And I think you can remember that among all nations in the world, Korea is the only country who invited, or still inviting, veterans to Korea and to express our thanks to them. I think you can imagine how we feel about United States. And also, Japan's, recent, the movement, I feel some extent of apprehension that Koreans are too much sensitive. I understand why you said that, but from our perspective, as I said, once we were invaded, and we made it clear to Japanese government that without clear consent from us, you cannot come to us. But anyhow, they made an example of operating their collective self-defense rights on the Korean Peninsula. That's why we are so sensitive. But what I want to point out was lack of transparency and their attitude of having prior consultation with us. If it is related with us, and if it affects our own future and our own security, then they should have consultation with us first. And in that way, they can get our trust as well. Yes.
Okay. Dr. Kill and...
well, brief answer, kind of addendum to Minister Kim's answer to Alan. So I think there is a clear limit at the moment of Japanese debate on the collective self-defense. But I'm personally rather concerned about the direction of such a kind of debate. And still wars and deeds of Japanese leaders on that issues are evolving, under evolution. I'm concerned about the direction. This kind of directions reach the normal state, and beyond that, what kind of direction of Japanese thinking of so-called their own strategic thinking, and underlining kind of mindset. Why Japanese, as I mentioned earlier in my statement, why Japanese are now really kind of seriously discussing on that issues. That is my basic concern. And another kind of answer to Mike, I think your comment is very relevant. We should pay much more attention on that kind of China's concern about the U.S. and missile defense issues, basically against China's military threat. I think we surely appreciate that kind of reading and understanding of the situation, but probably that's why the South Korea is very concerned about the make our position clear, to simply accepting the U.S. request of joining the U.S. initiated the missile defense against China. I think that is, we need some strategic consideration for that.
Sorry?
I share Alan's concern, but at the same time I have some different opinion in a sense that I fully understand that Koreans have some biases and prejudice about Japan, and then thinking all the Japanese move as being dangerous. I don't share that perception, but the one thing is for sure, we don't know about the future. We are so accustomed to the pacifist to pacifism of Japan. I don't know what kind of Japan will be if we are proactively normal. We don't know. So I'm not pretty much sure about what happens in the future. But we know so certainly about one thing in the past. We have a clear historical memory and historical experience. That's the reason why we are very much worried about the kind of Abe and the right wingers bringing out the glorious past of Japan. If you wanted to convince the immediate neighbors, don't do that, okay? Because that gives us a kind of bad memory of Japanese atrocities and misdemeanors in the past. So if you just draw out a kind of a bad experience to the fore, we always reminded of kind of bad historical memory. So don't be reminded. Don't wake up sleeping memories. That's the kind of the ask from us. And one more thing, American friends can say that, oh, don't worry, Japan is not dangerous. You can say that complacently because you have the capability to control the situation. Unfortunately, Korea doesn't have that much capability to control Japan if things go wrong.
Tom and Emma, would you take this, the question raised, the comment raised by the, Madame Chen about all this, the so-called Chinese and Korean perception of the past history? No, or you want to pass?
Well, I mean, I certainly sympathize with the victims of aggression and atrocity, and make no apologies for what was done by the grandfathers and great-grandfathers of people in Japan today. My point is simply that the foregoing of opportunities and the shirking of what I would regard as obligations to build a better future, because not everything in the past has been resolved to the satisfaction of everybody, strikes me as an unfortunate choice. There. So I've got them. I can't respond to Mike Billington. I absolutely accept nothing in terms of the characterization of U.S. policies or preparations, except for the nature of China's concern. China's concern about the alliances with the ROK and with Japan, which many Chinese are convinced are the leading edge, the spear point for the inevitable American attack on China. As was written hundreds of years ago in classic Chinese warfare about relations among states, war is inevitable between rising and status quo powers. I say nonsense. These guys may have been very clever when they wrote it, but they did not anticipate nuclear weapons. And I would be very hard-pressed, and I suspect everybody in the room would be, to say what is a reason for which the United States would run the risk of nuclear retaliation by China that would justify some type of a military attack to which we would coerce our allies in the ROK and Japan into being in the leading edge, or that we would begin it with the 28,000 troops in South Korea on there. These just beggar the imagination to come up with a rationale that say that's a good idea. Let's attack China, our largest trading partner, the key to stability in the region, and suffer the destruction of all major cities. That's just not going to happen.
Emma, do you want to add?
I just have one thing to add. In terms of the concern among some in the region that Japan is going to return to its militarist past or somehow go its own, I actually think that if you look at what, if Japan reinterpreted its constitution to allow for the right of collective self-defense, that actually would tend to bind it more tightly with the organizations and the institutions and the alliances that exist in the region, which I think many would argue would be a check. As I understand it, exercising this right would simply mean that Japan has more freedom and flexibility to engage in peacekeeping operations, to deepen their partnerships in terms of exercises or HADR activities with others in the region. I do think that Japan has a responsibility to reach out and to educate not only its public but others in the region about what this change might mean. But from all of the discussion that I've heard about it, it actually would have the effect of binding Japan more tightly with others in the region.
I'll recognize three persons, one gentleman over here and the gentleman over there, and then the gentleman sitting in the last row. But I hope to make it in a very concise comment or question. Okay, we have just 10 minutes left.
Okay, thank you for a great presentation. First, my name is Youngchen Kim. I'm a graduate school student from Fletcher School. I have a question. I think we forgot another important player in this region. Not only the Captain America and the Kung Fu Panda are back in the ring, but also Russia is back in the ring, and they claim they are coming back to the east also. So my question is here, what do you think the rising Russia and its pivot to east would impact this complex dynamics in this region?
To whom do you want to address that question?
I'd like to ask...
you choose one.
Thomas Finger. Dr. Thomas Finger. Dr. Thomas Finger.
Dr. Thomas Finger. Do you have one? Don't ask any question to Thomas Finger because time is no time. Yes, gentleman over there.
Steve Winters, Washington-based researcher. I'd like to ask the panelists from Korea whether there's been any discussion or concern in Korea about the way in which Abe is proceeding to bring about this reinterpretation of the Constitution. At least in Japan, there's a lot of discussion because of the fact he appointed a big panel to advise him on this, whether it could be reinterpreted in the way he wishes, and then appointed his own people with known views that it could be to the panel to advise him on whether it could be. And more importantly, he appointed his own person, totally out of traditional line of appointment, to be the head of the so-called cabinet legislative bureau, which advises Abe on the constitutionality of proposed legislation. All this is well known and discussed in Japan. The point being, it's a very small group of people who are saying that this reinterpretation is constitutional, and those people were appointed because Abe knew they had that view. So what's the Korean view of this? Because it doesn't appear to be going according to a thoughtful democratic procedure.
Charlie, why don't you, answer to him? And also, if Emma, if you have any disagreement with him, then you can, join later. And the gentleman at the last row.
I go to a lot of meetings like this, and they all talk about the importance of our alliances. The one alliance that's never mentioned.
Would you kindly identify yourself?
Stanley Kober. The one alliance that's never mentioned is SEATO. SEATO was a major commitment of the United States. What are the lessons of the SEATO experience for our current alliances?
Okay, who wants to talk about the SEATO? Oh, the Minister Kim.
Well,
okay, now one by one. Tom first, and then Charlie, and then the Minister Kim.
I don't see Russia playing a very much larger role in East Asia in the near term than it is now. It's got plenty of internal challenges. It acts more and more and more like a Eurocentric player. It doesn't have that many people. It doesn't have that much activity. It doesn't have that much military strength in East Asia. It wishes to be included in anything that is discussed in the region, and I don't have any objections to that. But I think in the near term, Russia is neither going to be a significant force for stability, a force for constructive change, or that it's going to be particularly disruptive. It's just, it will sell energy to East Asian customers, and probably not a lot more.
Charlie?
First of all, I think the changing constitution or reinterpreting the constitution is Japanese choice. I don't think the others cannot meddle into the problem. But the two things are worrisome in a sense that, one, I don't know this reinterpretation of collective self-defense kind of thing is the kind of start of the process or end of the process. Because Abe tried to revise the constitution in the beginning, and it's not so much supported by the public, and then change the kind of process of, all right, wanted to change the Article 96 in order to lower down the constitutional revision process. And then it was not popular. And then he moved to the reinterpretation of the constitution. So that gives a kind of very twisted feeling about the constitutional reinterpretation. And second, as you mentioned, it is the leaders of Japan rather than the people of Japan who wants to reinterpret the constitution. Still, especially as for the Article 9 of Japanese constitution, opinions are roughly divided. Still, the majority of Japanese do not want to change Article 9, but still, the Japanese leaders wanted to change it. So I think if Japan is the authentic democracy, I think they have to listen to the people first.
Mr. Kim?
Yeah, I think SEATO is now not working anymore. But anyhow, ASEAN is there now. And as Danny mentioned in his speech, in expanding our US-Korea alliance, cooperation with the ASEAN is one of the areas where we can do jointly. So in that sense, please understand that direction there.
Okay, this last round of comments and questions. Now we have Shioko. You really wanted to raise a question, since you're the master of the house. Therefore, you have a chance. But let me start with Minister Kong, and then President Kim, and then the gentleman over there, and the Shioko. You're the last. Okay. Now I'm giving you a special honor to you. Okay. Very quick and prompt.
Very quick. As a former ambassador to Japan, I feel obliged to come in aid of Dr. Park, who is a fellow member of Korea-Japan Forum. Well, in some sense, there is a reality in Japan's desire for becoming a normal state. When Japanese nowadays going as PKO forces, they are not fully allowed to shoot if there is an adversary forces to come and attack, such as allies like Korea, whose camp is right beside them. So they are extremely limited by the interpretation of Article 9. So in that sense, we have a certain understanding and sympathy for their desire for normalization. Japan has no national anthem, no national, formally no national anthem, and they don't have a national flag to which they pay their tribute and respect. Of course, you see a lot of Japanese flag over there, but they don't use it in the official ceremony as like we do, or in the United States. So in that sense, there is a certain desire for Japanese people to become a normalized country. That much, I think, we should take into account when we talk about their normalization. But the movement by Japanese for normalization comes from extreme right nationalists. That is a problem. If such a movement is initiated by, for instance, former Prime Minister Murayama or Professor Wada Haruki of Tokyo University, well, certainly many people could understand, but a lot of anxiety is caused by neighboring countries, as I mentioned this afternoon. It was because these are motivated and initiated by extreme nationalists. That's all.
Thank you. President Kim Sang-ju.
Yeah, let me just speak up. I'm Sang-ju Kim of ICAS. Recently, North Korea and Japan reached some kind of deal, commonly known as the Stockholm Agreement. What is your sense from Seoul's view?
That one, I think, the Minister Kim, do you want to answer to that one?
Yeah.
And then maybe the Charlie can supplement it. And third gentleman over there, yes.
Yes, I'm Dennis Halpin from the US-Korea Institute. I just wanted to say, Professor Kim, you mentioned before the inviting the veterans back to Korea. Also, Korea is the only country that invites old Peace Corps volunteers back, and I went on the program last year, so thank you for that. But my question was, besides constitutional revision, before the Diet goes into summer recess, they're supposed to receive in the next few days the report on the re-examination of the 1993 Kono Statement. The Chosun Ilbo editorial yesterday said this could be the end of Korea-Japanese relations. There's rumors that it will say the Japanese government was pressured by South Korea, or that the old comfort women victims who gave testimony and are now dead were not accurate. So my question is, what will be the impact of the release of this re-examination on Korea-Japanese relations?
Maybe Charlie, you can answer that one. And it's very fortunate for us to have, the question or comments from the Shioko. Okay. We need the voice from Japan too, okay?
No pressure, right? I'm Shihoko Goto with the Wilson Center. A question possibly for Dr. Park. Constitutional reinterpretation is a very sensitive subject within Japan, as you know. And there is quite a lot of public opposition to it. And the time frame to actually move forward with it is limited. And so there is a possibility, perhaps a slim possibility, but a possibility nonetheless, that it will not move forward. In which case, I believe it would ultimately weaken the US-Japan alliance. If that is the case, would that a weaker US-Japan alliance be in Korea's interest?
Okay, Charlie. Okay, then the Minister Kim, you answer to those two questions, okay?
Well, regarding this recent Japan-North Korea agreement on abductee issues, well, it is a bit embarrassing to us as well. And there are also worries in Korea that this agreement may dent, international sanctions which is in force, and also kind of coordination among three of us. Three means Korea, Japan, the United States, coordination on North Korean nuclear issues. So there is a worries about that, definitely. And if there is, revision on Kono's statement, it will have a huge impact on Korea-Japan relations. At the moment, we don't know how they will announce it, but if there is a change on that, then that will have a huge impact on that. Yes.
Charlie?
Reverse order. The weaker US-Japan alliance is not in the interest of Korea. Also, economically depressed Japan is not in the interest of Korea. We want to see Japan economically vibrant and having good relationship with the United States. But I don't think the kind of the slowed down of the pace of constitutional reinterpretation would weaken the alliance between the two. You can do it. So I'm not that much worried. I'm not that much worried about it, especially, and then constitutional interpretation in the ultimate sense will not come as an extreme form, because Komeito is in opposition and the public oppositions are there. I think they will find a very reasonable balance ultimately, not yet. So as for the corner statement, yes, as Minister Kim said, it's a kind of detrimental to the Korea-Japan relations, because it will the intention of the review is to giving a scar on the face of Kono's statement. Much more problematic is that Abe toned down his interpretation about the Kono statement, and then he officially, publicly announced that he's going to inherit Kono's statement in its entirety. But if you review and then try to suggest a different opinion, it creates a kind of inconsistency problem. What is true? What is honne and what is datemae? So you have to make it straightforward. If you want to accept the Kono statement, just accept it. Don't say but after that.
Okay, by way of concluding this panel, let me just make a couple of remarks. First, I think ROK-US relations is very good. The relations are very good. And also I learned from the Tom that the alliance is a subset of ROK-US cooperation. Therefore, in the past, alliance was everything for us. But now, and from now on, there are some other areas for mutual cooperation. That's a very important lesson. And second one, again, which was raised by Tom, that is what? We got to really think about it. What is the most ideal security architecture? As he pointed out, now bilateral alliance is the only security architecture in the region. How can you go beyond? Because alliance presupposes existence of common enemy and common threat. Okay? Can we come up with a regional order that can presuppose the absence of common enemies and common threat, so that we can create really community, security community, okay? Or what the United Nations Charter says in a collective security system. I think that is very important the really topic to be addressed in years to come. And third one is relational dynamics. It is better to have cooperation than conflict. Conflict and cooperation coexist, but it's better for us to minimize conflict and maximize cooperation. And in my personal case, I think South Korea got to improve ties with North Korea first. Then our dependency on, alliance dependence on the United States will be reduced. Meanwhile, our comprehensive corporate ties with the United States will be further enhanced. Then we don't have to worry about China either, okay? And Japan got to cooperate with us too. Therefore, think about that kind of things. Instead of, of course, the most important thing is China-US. But once inter-Korean relations get worsened, that inter-Korean relations can be kind of excuse for worsening Beijing-Washington ties. Therefore, Koreans got to be very, very prudent about this issue. And also, another important issue raised was the distance between reality and imagination. Chinese rise, Chinese threat, tend to be contrived. The user term is contrived too, but the reality could be somewhat different. But we tend to, domestic politics give more weight to imagined threat, imagined power, rather than actual power and actual intention. Then why is that? Because of domestic politics. China wants survival of Chinese Communist Party. Okay, why Abe is doing that? Domestic political parties. Okay, he wanted to give us some, harm to, Murayama-san and Kono-san. Okay, and Kono Taro also opposed Abe's nuclear initiative, and therefore intertwined with domestic politics. Finally, really whole issue. I was always puzzled by Abe's thinking, because he seems to be the captive of proportionality. Okay, most of comfort women in Korea were mobilized by Korean middlemen who bought young ladies from the poor rural families and brought to the so-called brothels along the front line. What Japanese military did, very minor, very small. But on these kinds of universal ethical issues, proportionality doesn't matter. Now go back to the massacre of Nanking, same thing. Oh, all we killed was less than 50,000. The whole Chinese historical data on 220,000. That's wrong. Fabrication. No, it is not the way Japanese leadership approach, particularly in mature democracy. With this, I conclude. Would you give a big applause to the whole panelists? Their wonderful performance. Thank you. Thank you.
Excellent. Just a full announcement. We're going to take a 15-minute break. Thank you. Come back in. Come back in. We've got head site.
Oh, really? I really wanted to. Did you get out? You're getting out with Global Asia. I am.
I am.